Welcome to Civil Justice for SA Survivors.
Welcome back to Civil Justice for SA Survivors with attorneys Marc Pearlman and Melissa Anderson. Marc and Melissa represent survivors of SA or sexual assault and exploitation across Illinois, guiding them through the civil justice process with compassion and clarity. I'm Leanne Lyon, and today we're talking about how life events can trigger the truth. Welcome back, Marc and Melissa. For some of your clients, silence was a survival tactic, a way to keep their job, raise a family, or just stay sane. What was the emotional cost of wearing that armor for their entire lifetime of childhood sex abuse victims?
So you had mentioned wearing an armor, and that's a lot like what it's like keeping that secret. And I think about it as if somebody's wearing a mask and never really truly connecting with their true self to other people. That's one of the biggest things that we see with the impact that SA has on an individual's ability to really connect. Um, and have emotional intimacy with people. So a lot of the times we'll hear that throughout their life as they're wearing this armor, they're keeping everyone in their life, including their spouses and their children, at arm's length. And that's to me one of the saddest pieces of this is seeing how it's impacted them being able to make true connection and feeling really truly alone because of their inability to do that. Fortunately, once they have disclosed the abuse and are able to share that secret with just even one person, often us, when they pick up the phone to call, you see that mask slowly coming down, and they tell us stories about how they're able to connect with their spouse oftentimes, or share their story with their friends, which is a first step in really becoming emotionally intimate with other people.
I do think it's important though, a couple things. One is, you know, when we work with clients, it's a process. And the process is one that we've developed, but it's dependent on our client doing a lot of hard work in terms of dealing with the trauma that they experience. So really all the credit for their healing goes to them, not to us. The other thing that's really important to recognize is the fact that you're keeping silent. It's a double-edged sword in the sense that it often keeps people alive. The silence is what they need to protect themselves. And sometimes it's completely unconscious. They don't even know they're keeping a secret. Um, so it really is something that, it takes time for people to feel comfortable, in their body, in their brain to feel comfortable to disclose the secret. But that's something that as we learn more, as we talk more, then people are more aware of it and much more likely to come forward sooner, which is critical.
When a survivor does finally decide to speak up, and maybe it's been 30 years at that point, what is the primary emotion that comes up for them? Is it fear? Is it relief or anger? What is it?
All of the above. And you know, the process, at the beginning, it's one step forward, two steps back. It's not as if you disclose this and immediately you feel unbelievable and amazing and feel like something has changed. Um, we oftentimes have clients who a month, 2 months into this, they're questioning whether they did the right thing by coming
Mhm.
forward. But by the end of it, they call us to say, "I'm a completely different human being. Like,
Mhm.
my life is so different and so worth living. I haven't lived until now."
Mhm.
And that's just, that's why we do this.
And I
Mm.
find it encouraging when I see emotion when somebody particularly when someone's disclosing for the first time and they've told me this is the first time they've ever told anyone, and then there's no emotion in connection with it. That's more concerning to me than seeing an immediate flood of emotions, because I think it's that immediate flood of emotions that starts people on their journey to try to heal. But yeah, it's a lot of different emotions all at one time, and they work through those. But even those clients that don't show emotion right away, typically we do see that at some point in the process, and that's always when I sort of perk up and I'm excited for them that they're starting to work through it.
That's gorgeous. As you just mentioned, sometimes you are the first person that a victim tells his or her story to. How does it change a person's spirit to finally be told, I believe you, and what happened was not your fault?
So it's huge. Most survivors of SA, what they really want is to be heard and believed. And when we hear their stories, um, and we believe that their story is credible and this happened to them, the first thing we do is say, "We're so sorry this happened to you, and we believe you." And that's huge. There are cases that we can't accept just because we've concluded that there's nothing we could do for the victim. But we still talk to them, sometimes an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. And we tell them if their story, if we, based on our expertise, we tell them we believe you and we hear you. Even though we can't help you um, in the in connection with some kind of civil matter, we do believe you, and there's hopefully there's other ways we can help, like guiding them to professionals in mental health or things of that nature. But
Well, it's been said that survivors, and you've noted obviously, that survivors often wait until there is a major life shift, like maybe the death of a parent or their own child reaching a certain age or even retirement, to speak up. Why does the dam break at these specific milestones?
I think that, well, it's the triggering of being reminded of it sometimes on a daily basis when you're looking at your own children or your grandchildren and you're realizing um, you're starting to connect with who you were as a child and realizing how wrong that was. Sadly, realizing for the first time that it was wrong and that you weren't responsible. And that's oftentimes why I think that's when the dam breaks for them. And we do have a lot of people who come forward when they're first retiring, and I think it's just having the freed up time to sit with how they're feeling and, no longer being able to try to distract themselves from it because it's always there in their mind, and they do everything, often are doing everything they can to distract themselves and focusing on other people, their family, their job, and when they have that time to reflect, that's oftentimes when the dam breaks for them.
and when the dam breaks, there are many common um, times where we see that dam break, like
Mhm.
your children getting to a particular age, or a parent dying, or but it for many, it's not a common thing. It's something completely random. I recall probably 20 years ago, I had a client who what triggered their memory and allowed them to come forward was the smell of an aftershave that the perpetrator, like, he smelled the aftershave and it made him physically ill, and he came forward.
Wow, that's our minds and bodies are so incredibly powerful, and like we've mentioned in an earlier episode, we can hang on to things physically. But changing topics a little bit here, many survivors fear that if they speak up, that they will actually ruin their family or social circle. So how do you help somebody process the guilt of potentially upsetting a status quo that was, potentially built on a lie?
So I try to we try to reframe it sometimes for our clients and helping them recognize what a gift it is sometimes to share that with their spouse or their children or their friends. Because really they think they're ruining something, but really what they're doing is, I think, a gift sometimes to those around them because it's answering questions for those people. There are probably very few spouses married to somebody who's a survivor of SA that hasn't wondered why is my spouse behaving this way? Or internalizing and thinking, what have I done to make it so my spouse isn't connecting with me or that we're having intimacy issues? And just by sharing that is oftentimes helps everyone around them, answering those questions. And as they were a lot of our clients, as they reflect on specific relationships, sometimes with their kids, when their kids are adults and they've shared it with their kids, a lot of times their kids have said, this makes sense to me now. Because particularly your children, no matter what age, are thinking, what was it about me that made my dad or my mom react the way that they did my whole childhood? And by shedding light on them and why is really helpful for everyone. So we try to reframe it to help them understand you're not ruining anything, and particularly sharing it with people who love you is what I view as a gift. I get really, I'm so happy for my clients when they're able to they in the beginning, they might say, "Oh, I can't tell my wife about this." And then at the end, they do, and I'm always so glad to see that happen.
And oftentimes, when we are the first people that they've told, the question they have is, how do I tell my wife this or my husband this after 25 years? Like, they're going to be so upset that I've kept this from them. And that's just not the case. They're always supportive and they understand that, that, you couldn't tell, you couldn't speak about it. You never spoke about it with anyone. The other dynamic we experience all the time is victims, survivors of SA, one of the things that they um, hate more than anything is seeing their loved ones put through pain. And they've become professionals at enduring pain and blocking pain and suppressing pain. So they much prefer to take on the pain of the people that they love and care about. So oftentimes they don't disclose because they're thinking, why would I put my loved one through that and cause them pain that they weren't here for, had nothing to do with? This is my baggage. I'll deal with it. So, we do have to um, kind of change their thinking in that regard a bit to these are people who love you and support you, and they need to understand what's going on.
Yeah, before we were recording, we actually talked about, it's such a blessing that you do what you do and that this is coming more to light, that it's more acceptable to bring things forward. But society often tells survivors that they should be over it by now. How does that pressure create a secondary level of shame for someone who is struggling even decades later?
We do see clients that are afraid of that being something and feeling almost guilty for coming forward when they do. And a lot of times we hear, well, these specific people who are now in charge or, in a workplace situation or clergy abuse, sometimes our clients will say, well, the priest that did this to me is dead. And they're at fault, and the people who were in charge of the church at the time are no longer around. They feel guilty about it, and, you know, they certainly have not gotten over what happened to them and shouldn't pretend that they have, but also we reinforce for them how important it is to just by coming forward and putting out there to the people who we think are responsible for this happening, that what they're doing is saving future children from ever being abused, because without people talking about it, nothing will ever change. M- Perhaps if we just continue to talk about this, it won't take people 40 years to come forward, and they'll start be able to disclose earlier and start to deal with it so they can get through it faster.
The other thing that's, very apparent to us is that just get over it is easy to say when it's not someone that's one of your loved ones. But when it is, trust me, nobody says, "Oh, just get over it," right? It's easy to say that when it's somebody that you have no idea who they are. You hear a story on the news and you're like, "All right, come on, it was 30 years ago. Get over it," right? Um, but, you know, if it's your spouse, if it's your child, if it's and you realize all the challenges they've gone through in life, there is no just get over it.
Right. Well, you've mentioned also that there's a profound shift when a person stops seeing themselves as a victim and starts seeing themselves as a truth teller. How have you seen that shift change a person's actual physical appearance or confidence?
Yeah, we talked about this a bit in the yeah, we talked about it in the last episode a little bit, like, when we see somebody who presents to us the very first time, slouching and what have you, and by the end of the process, their shoulders are back, their head is up, their just their entire demeanor shifts. Um, and it's just a product of being weighed down. Like, and all of us experience different things in our life. Nothing is traumatic, perhaps, as being sexually abused. Um, but we experience periods where we feel a little down, and we in our and we it's reflected in how our physical presence is. Um, and so it's really a remarkable thing to see our clients transform,
Mhm.
certainly physically, more importantly, mentally,
Mhm.
from the beginning to the process to the end of the process.
And, in the beginning, most of our clients are very concerned about confidentiality. And fortunately, we are able to give them assurances that their name's not going to get out there if they don't want it to. And they're so concerned that someone's going to find out. And it's encouraging because as they're sharing with us and sharing with, those responsible for what happened to them, the institutions that oversee the perpetrators that have done this to them, they a lot of our clients become less and less concerned about who finds out that this was done to them. They have a shift where they recognize this was like any other crime. This happened to them. They did not do this. They should not take ownership for what was done to them. And so becoming a truth teller along with that is often them realizing this is my story, this is what was done to me, and I have nothing to be ashamed of. So they become a lot more confident and shift from feeling like a victim to feeling like they are somebody who's actively doing something to help this issue and this problem that is so prevalent.
And there are a lot of different reasons why people seek confidentiality. So, and legitimate
Mhm.
reasons, like, I have small children who are in school, and kids could just be ruthless, and I don't want my kids suffering because of this, et cetera, et cetera. But the other thing is, confidentiality is still a sense of shame, like that somehow you should be ashamed of something, so you don't want to use your name. And I've had clients who, when we started, they wanted to be a John Doe or a Jane Doe. And about halfway through the process, they said, screw this. This didn't happen to John Doe or Jane Doe. This happened to me. And and saying this happened to me is a big step also, because that takes all accountability for anything you did out of the picture.
Mhm.
Excellent. Well, going from survivor to truth teller is also an inspiring shift just to imagine.
Yeah.
So, well, that is it for today's episode of Civil Justice for SA Survivors. If you'd like to learn more about what Mark and Melissa can do for survivors in Illinois, you can visit pearlmananderson.com for additional resources. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time. If this discussion helped you better understand your rights, please share it so that more survivors and families can find clear, trustworthy information. Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Leanne.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.